Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to contribute with this conference on natural resource management in semi-arid lands of the MENA region and to talk about possibilities to build on traditional knowledge and agroecology within the framework of Aurora webinar series. Go ahead, please. The outline, I will start with the introduction. I will characterize the semi-arid climate. I will talk about ecological principles for sustainable agro-ecosystems. I will talk about the necessity for building and traditional knowledge in the whole region of the MENA. I will give some examples. The first one will be on the oasis production system. The second one will be on the terrace farming. And I will talk about agroforestry and the need to use or to make use of agroecology as a way for sustainable development. Please. About half of the land area is sensitive to drought. With global warming, the world is likely to become increasingly prone to further episodes of drought. Climate change makes precipitation more irregular and less predictable. Longer, deeper periods of drought and flood would have deep and long-term negative impacts in the region. Droughts affects 2 billion people, and it has killed about 11 million since 1900s and causes damages between $6 and $8 billion US dollars per year. According to FAO study, drought causes 83% of all damage and loss to agriculture and 86% to livestock. The increasing incidence of extreme weather conditions will have increasingly negative impacts on agriculture as critical thresholds are already exceeded. Please. Through the semi-arid lands of the developing world, small-scale, resource-poor farmers who manage such risk-prone and marginal environments remain largely untouched by modern agricultural technology. Although risk and uncertainty dominates the lives of these rural inhabitants, many farmers have been able to develop durable farming systems through the use of innovative soil and water management systems and the use of locally adapted soil and locally adapted crop species and varieties as well. Based on ecological rationale and by manipulating nature indirectly, farmers perform small-scale management of the local environment, which moderates natural hazards, allowing them to obtain a sustainable harvest from the land even in the midst of drought. What is the semi-arid climate? It's the next driest climate after the desert climate. It receives precipitation of between 250 and 500 millimeters. Sometimes it goes from 250 to 440. Often it's considered the intermediate between the desert and humid climates. Please. This map, worldwide map, shows arid and semi-arid regions of the world. And more than 90% of the MENA region has been classified as arid and semi-arid regions, including North Africa and the whole Middle East. Go ahead. Land and water are scarce in the MENA region, and both rain-fed and irrigated land in use suffer from ongoing degradation caused by wind and water erosion and unsustainable farming practices. In most of these countries, farms are quite small and hence subject to the challenges experienced by smallholders everywhere. Furthermore, the region is predicted to become even hotter and drier in the future due to climate change. Please. This map shows where water stress will be highest by 2040. We have here the projected ratio of water withdrawal compared to water supply every year in 2040. As again, we can see through this map, the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa can correspond to a region with extremely high water stress by 2040. Go ahead. We will talk here about the importance of traditional knowledge that was developed through centuries, 1,000 years ago in the region. It concerns environmental sustainability, food processing, grain storage, healthcare, ethnobotany or medicine, and natural resource management. Please. Despite marginal land endowments and low use of external inputs, well-adapted farming systems to the local conditions of the semi-arid environment were developed by traditional farmers. This enabled them to generate sustained yields and meet their subsistence needs. This performance has always been linked to the ingenious soil and water conservation systems, the high level of agrobiodiversity exhibited by traditional agroecosystems, which in turn positively influences agroecosystem function. Go ahead. The adopted techniques are environmentally sustainable based on the use of local resources, combining homegrown knowledge, appropriate external knowledge, and with an emphasis lies on the improving whole farming performance and productivity rather than the yield of specific commodities. Please. So ingenious soil and water management systems were developed by farmers, which corresponds to traditional farming systems, allowing high degree of plant diversity, polycultures, agroforestry, and combining livestock with all these. Go ahead. So minimizing risks through conserving soils, harvesting water, and planting several species of plants and varieties of crops allowed to stabilize yield over the long term, to promote diet diversity of the population, and to maximize returns even under low levels of technology, limited resources, and water stress. Please. Complex farming systems inherited through generations in areas of limited rainfall and adapted to the local conditions helped small farmers to sustainably manage harsh environment, to meet their subsistence needs, as we already said, and without depending on mechanization, chemical fertilizers, pesticides, or other technologies of modern agricultural science. Go ahead. Agroecological principles are urgently needed to develop more sustainable agroecosystems, to increase food production in the marginal drylands areas where a great mass of poor people are concentrated, to speed the emergence of agroecological principles in order to develop more sustainable agroecosystems and agrobiodiversity conservation strategies. And also it is important to study the traditional forms of natural resource management and the ways in which peasants maintain and use biodiversity in such harsh environments. Please. Many traditional systems have collapsed, unfortunately, or disappeared in many parts of the world. However, there is persistence of millions of hectares under traditional agriculture. Some of the successful indigenous agricultural strategies are raised fields, terraces, polycultures, agroforestry systems, water harvesting systems. This comprises a tribute to the creativity of small farmers through history. These macrocosms of traditional agriculture offer promising models for other areas as they promote biodiversity, thrive without agrochemicals, and sustain yield-round production. Go ahead. Following are three examples that will highlight the creativity of traditional farmers living in semi-arid regions and the ecological complexity that underlies under traditional innovation. We will talk about the oasis production system, the terrace farming system, but we will not have time to talk about Ryland, but we can have a discussion on it, please. With regard to oasis production system, it is a form of adaptation to the harsh physical conditions of arid environment. It's an area of sedentary life which associates the city, Medina, or village, Qsar, with its surrounding feeding source, the palm grove. It is a small area in the desert where the presence of water allows for cultivation. Go ahead. Water is an asset, but it's also a major constraint. It determines the development strategies for the future through technological innovation, but we have to make bold choices between either stabilization or reduction of surfaces, which is called hedgehog strategy, strategiat al-qunfud, or extension and creation of new oasis, which called bull strategy, please. For centuries, the oasis has been able to overcome the major obstacles of the desert. It is a perfect model of sustainable development through ecological peculiarities, economic function in favor of a society well adapted to the desert conditions, offering many services and many benefits, please. So it's a green, the oasis is a green island in the desert. It allows a symbiosis between humidity, heat, and light. It allows a biodiversity reservoir due to its rich flora and fauna, all making together the system used for shelf culture and practices that maintain the soil fertility. The latter is maintained by cyclic organic inputs of animal origin, but also by the use of shelf culture system. Please. We witness a great diversity of crops and livestock within the oasis agro-ecosystem, agricultural or productive function, allowing agricultural or productive function, strategic or territorial function, recreational or tourist function, symbolic or identity function, and it allows to carry multiple other functions, please. Palm trees serve ecological purposes. It protects the trees and plants that are positioned on the lower layers. It plays the role of a windbreak. It's an umbrella to protect plant species below from atmospheric aggressiveness. It prevents the soil to become dry. It improves the water reserve in the driest ground, and it allows to mitigate the damage from natural hazards such as the sandstorms, please. The palm grove is an ecological unit. It acts as a stabilizer and crop regulator, fixing large amounts of dust, limiting the advancement of the desert, plays a bioclimatic role contributing to the evapotranspiration, and it plays a potential evapotranspiration that could be reduced by 30 to 50% within the area of the oasis, please, compared to the region within which it exists. The palm grove constitutes the fundamental element of the oasis ecosystem. It's the main source of income and employment. It provides a diverse food production. It's an exotic treasure and encourages tourism, internal and external. It allows the development of underlying crops up to 3 layers of vegetation. It allows nutritional balance and improvement of family incomes. It allows conservation of agrobiodiversity of local species, and it offers microclimate favorable to crops through shading, wind, and evapotranspiration reduction, please. The palm grove plays a major role also in the social lives of the inhabitants, ensuring the social stability of the population. It positively influences their living environment and their health. It is a natural refuge of pure air where the oasis women and men find a positive psychological effect and the favorable response to his need for rest and relaxation. It also allows conservation of traditional knowledge and know-how. Through judicious and sustainable use of natural resources, through irrigation techniques or biodiversity with respect to the choice of adapted crops to the microclimate of the oasis, please. The palm tree is also a constructive element. It can be used as planks for construction, to make baskets and fence. It can be used as beams for the habitats, and it plays a major role as protective fences, please. As I said earlier, we have to make choices between stabilizing or reduction of surfaces or extension and creation of new oases. Unfortunately, not only in Morocco, but elsewhere in Saudi Arabia, in Yemen, in Iraq, in Egypt, we are most of the time extending and creating new plantation, generally as a monoculture instead of adopting the oasis ecosystem, please. This have an impact on groundwater depletion in many parts of the MENA region. I will give here an example in some areas of Morocco when we have excessive lowering of groundwater in intensively exploited sectors. Please, you see the decrease of water table. Please. We have also another phenomenon. It's almost 10 years old, which is fires that are we are witnessing lately in the oasis system, please. According to the data by the Ministry of Agriculture of Morocco and the indicators of fires in Moroccan oasis for the period 2010-2019, the affected area during the past 10 years amounted to 672 hectares. And this surface is not negligible under oasis conditions. And the number of damages palms was 90,190 during the same period. Oasis fires are due to a number of reasons, among them the accumulation of palm residues that are left in the oasis, jarid, in the absence of the process of cleaning this harmful nest from palm grove, and it resulted from abandoning the old customs that were adopted by the oasis residents to collect these residues and use them as a firewood in the daily cooking of the house. But today, these habits have changed, making palm residues firewood for the oasis fires instead. Please. A strange phenomenon also has begun to multiply in recent years, which is the use or the exploitation of this firewood from the palm grove that are accumulated in the oasis and the production of luxury coal from it by preparing large number of buried kushas intended for charring, which constitute a real threat for the oasis. The Hassan II Institute of Agronomy and Veterinary Medicine, IAVI, in Rabat is currently working on this project so that infectious diseases such as biod, due to Fusarium, are not transferred after recycling the leaves and using it as organic fertilizer as a compost. Please. We see here the original plant material, and 2 months later, it's a good compost to be used for palm grove itself or for the whole vegetation that is grown beneath it. Please. The second system we will develop is the terrace system. It's existing in many parts of the MENA, but the most known country for it is Yemen, partially Saudi Arabia. Please. It's a farming system is seldom associated with the Arabian Peninsula, but Yemen was an exception to the rule. Over the centuries, Yemeni farmers transformed the rugged mountain slopes where agriculture would not normally occur into an extensive system of dryland terraces. The dryland farming in Yemen is one of the marvels of the world, and during the medieval period, Yemen had one of the widest ranges of agricultural crops of any MENA land at the time. Please. Yemeni farmers fundamentally altered the ecosystem centuries ago. Harsh natural terrain of the mountains were transposed into productive terrace systems. Traditional dryland farming was basically a sustainable practice, with Yemeni farmers attuned to conserving their resources of land and water. Please. The modernization of long-established system focused on subsistence production on dryland terraces in the highlands and seasonal flood irrigation along the wadis is becoming a dilemma of that in that country. The operating assumption of both the government of Yemen and the donors has been that productivity can only be improved by a shift to irrigation in the coastal zone and valleys of the central highlands. Please. Small, narrow terraces, when properly maintained, enhance water retention in the soil so that there is literally more crop per drop than would occur on a flat dryland. The terrace systems utilize slope runoff so that plots receive up to 30% more moisture than from direct rainfall on the soil. Crop growth is possible even with as little as 150 to 300 millimeters rain per year. This explains how agriculture was viable even in areas where rainfall data alone would not show sufficient precipitation. Please. According to degrees of slipness or steepness of the slope, if there is more than 30 degrees incline, terraces are quite narrow, at times no more than a meter width, and supporting as little as one row of crop, one row of trees. In more gentle slopes, up to 15 degrees incline, the terrace may be up to 8 meters wide. Few of these larger terraces exceeded 10 meters in length, and the most are much shorter. We see an area of Yemen where terraces before the rainy season And this is another region, but with similar system after the growth of crops, please. A slope is rarely continuous, so rocks and boulders are often incorporated into terrace walls. As we see here, the rocks for terrace walls are generally available locally, but soil usually has to be brought from the wadis, sometimes far away. Please. Right. Terraces were more and more abandoned in recent history, unfortunately. And we'll see the reasons. More than a third of the male workforce of Yemen migrated for work outside the country in the Gulf countries. The more distant and marginal dryland terraces were more and more abandoned. So as dryland farming was left on the shoulders of women, in many parts of the country, the process of terrace abandonment accelerated even more. The influx of bank transfers from migrant workers and the availability of cheap grains and basic food supplies from the international market discouraged local people to produce their own food. This is not the case anymore, as the prices of food is increasing everywhere. And we are witnessing also the return of men from outside going back home. Please. As I said earlier, both the government and Yemen and the donors were putting emphasis on the development of agriculture on the irrigation expansion. So we witnessed the expansion of what we call tube wells. The extensive system of dryland terraces, representing the vast majority of Yemen's agricultural land, has simply been written off as too marginal and too dependent on household labor. So no effort has been made through government programs to improve or at least stabilize the existing terraces. The area under groundwater irrigation in Yemen has increased. Please. Now, before this one. Now before. What happened? Okay, yeah, here. Go ahead. Next one. Okay. The area under groundwater irrigation in Yemen has increased from 37,000 hectares to 500,000 hectares in a matter of 40 years only. So there was an increased depletion of groundwater and dramatic drawdown of the water table, as we saw in the case of Morocco. Please. Despite periodic droughts and internal political disorders, the overall agricultural system of Yemen was adequate to meet the needs of the population over the centuries. The bottom line for increasing production in a large part of the country is the availability of water. So irrigation may soon no longer be viable, as the annual decline in the water table, as we already talked about, must now be measured in meters. Many farmers who have made major investment in sinking tube wells face loss of these investment as the water table continue to decline nationally and pumping costs are consequently increased. Please. So the loss of water added to the loss of agricultural land as dryland terrace system collapse through abandonment threatens irrigated land, especially along the upper and middle coastal wadis. Once the terraces are destroyed and the soil washed away, farmers are literally forced off the land and must seek employment elsewhere. However, few job opportunities but there is are created elsewhere in the cities, but there is a strong potential for building on the indigenous practices and knowledge of the environment in Yemen, and to go back to the terrace system as it used to be centuries ago, please. We see here now a terrace system with no degradation, please. With no degradation, and we see here a slightly degraded terraces, and there are some other pictures when the system totally collapsed, please. However, the highland terrace systems require proper maintenance, as we said, not only to preserve the agricultural land of the terrace system itself, but also to limit erosion of prime irrigated land in the wadis. Because of the centuries-old practices of water control are being set aside upstream, the yearly flooding of the wadis is becoming more and more destructive downstream, and this threatens the future development of flood irrigation in the coastal region, please. So future production over the long term is jeopardized through the decline of resources. We assist the decline water table, as we already said, in virtually every part of the country, and checked cutting of trees cover, erosion problems linked to abandonment of highland terraces. Decline of resources means decline of production, and there is a need of agricultural development to be re-evaluated, and the methods of achieving agricultural self-sufficiency must be re-evaluated. It is no longer possible to expand tube well irrigation. Please. There is little choice but to consider improving dryland and seasonal flood systems as it used to be. The essential issue is how to assist the vast majority of Yemeni farmers who are still farming in more or less in traditional fashion. The end goal should not be maximization of production per se, but rather improving the production context so that it is economically viable for farmers to remain on the land. Unfortunately, the expectations of Yemeni farmers have been raised unrealistically. It is the same in Morocco and elsewhere, but we are giving here an example of Yemen. By at least 3 decades of well-publicized promises about the benefits from mechanization and expansion of irrigation. The priority needed in many parts of the highlands is for terrace stabilization, rehabilitation, since previous abandonment has already resulted in considerable erosion damage. Please. From a technical point of view, one option is to encourage direct seeding of high-yield agroforestry crops, in addition to assisting in soil retention in the terraces. This would provide a crop well suited for the rural market. Similarly, there is a need for more fodder crops in Yemen because of the importance of the livestock. The continued cultivation of sorghum, a crop with extraordinary genetic diversity in Yemen, it must be also addressed. And because many rural Yemenis still consider sorghum a staple, it will be cultivated for years to come, regardless of profitability. Please. The most crucial factor affecting the future of terrace farming in Yemen, it should be a willingness of rural Yemeni to remain on the land and on their farms, and to come back to their villages and farms from cities where there are few opportunities for job creation. The shortage of household agricultural labor, it is no longer the case in recent years, as people who were migrants elsewhere are coming back to their country. Men who have not personally been involved in farming in the past decade have little choice but to learn and to return to their villages and fields and create wealth in their own villages. Please. We'll say a few words about agroforestry, please. It is practiced in the oasis we talked about. It is also can be used in the tourist systems. It's also used in dryland systems everywhere in Morocco, in Lebanon, in Algeria, in Tunisia. Agroforestry, it means all ecosystems where trees, crops, and sometimes animals are simultaneously associated on the same plot and interact with each other. Mitigating, it allows mitigating, adapting to climate change. Agroforestry is considered promising for mitigating and adapting to climate change while improving agricultural productivity, food security, and household income diversification. It's through ecosystem services. Agroforestry also provides ecosystem services such as the conservation and the improvement of biodiversity, soil health, efficient use of resources, and carbon sequestration. Please. In Morocco, agroforestry is a part of the traditional rural landscapes. It is dominant in the oasis. In hilly and arid areas, farmers seek to maximize the profitability of agricultural land and increase resource use efficiency. We have the example of olive agroforestry systems, which are generally characterized by low tree plantation, 12 by 12 meters or 10 by 10. Very little research has been undertaken on these associations, and to adapt this traditional system to new climatic and economic context, a better understanding of the diversity and functioning of existing system is necessary. And it started a few years ago in many parts of the country. Agroforestry systems have better agronomic and economic performance. Agricultural production and gross margins generated by agroforestry system are greater than those of the corresponding pure crops. The values of land equivalent ratio for yields and land equivalent ratio for margins are superior than 1, which confirms the hypothesis that agroforestry systems are more productive and efficient than poor cropping systems. The productivity gain is about 23% in yield and more than 5% in gross margin, which testifies the ecological and agronomic complementarity between the two strata. The very high productivity observed in association with legumes compared to cereals results from the conjunction of very favorable factors such as the distribution of rainfall, the short cycle of legumes, and their nitrogen fixation capacity. Please. As a conclusion, agroecological principles are urgently needed to develop more sustainable agroecosystems and agrobiodiversity conservation strategies in the semi-arid regions of the MENA region. The traditional forms of natural resource management and the ways in which peasants maintain and use biodiversity in such hard environments should be studied and improved. In order to minimize risks due to climate change, there is more need to implement crop husbandry aiming to conserving soils, harvesting more water, and planting several species of plant and varieties of crops. Production systems based on agroforestry and polycultures associated with livestock, as in the oasis, should be encouraged instead of monocropping adopted at the level of mega projects in areas where soil have been degraded and water resources in decrease. Please. The emphasis should be put on improving whole farming performance and productivity rather than the yield of specific commodities. Local knowledge should be well exploited and improved through the adoption of new techniques and new technologies. We should encourage adoption of circular agriculture in order to maintain and improve soil fertility through an approach of the management of soil, organic inputs that will allow cropping system sustainability. And we should adopt crop rotation, organic fertilization, and crop residue management. Please. Thank you. Shukran, Dank, Sean, and looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alawi, for this interesting presentation on natural resource management in the MENA region and for tracking these possibilities on building on traditional knowledge and agroecology. I now open the floor for questions from the audience. Please raise your hand or just unmute and say your question.
Abed?
Yes, please, Nasser.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Nasser, for this nice presentation. It was really helpful and rich in information. So I want just to add also one point regarding waste abandonment of lands. And one of the important factor of that push people and farmers to abandon their lands is urbanization. And those people find it as a good solution to migrate to the cities, which allows them to find the best income and best solution besides this hard weather and hard environment work in oasis.
Thank you, Nasser. This is a good remark. Actually, urban sprawling is taking much of the agricultural land everywhere, not only in the oasis, but in the oasis, which will make a big impact on the whole microclimate created by the oasis through centuries.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. There's a hand by Professor Tobias Bellinger, please.
Yeah, thank you so much for a great presentation. I'm having a question as you highlighted the role of agroforestry so much in your presentation. I'm wondering, when I was in Morocco, I was impressed by all these plantations of olives and figs that have been established in with the Green Morocco plan. But these are, as I perceive them, usually not traditional and not very diverse forms of agroforestry systems, but relatively simple mono-species plantation, mainly of olives. And I would be interested, how much value do you see in these plantations? Are these more modern, more intensive, more simplified agroforestry systems able to fulfill some of the functions that you presented, or is that the wrong way to go?
This is a good question and a good remark. Actually, I mentioned when I talked about the oasis system, I mentioned the mega project of planting thousands of palm trees in the desert using the groundwater, underground water resources, which is not a system which will be sustainable. The same thing applies to what you said about the mega olive project that has been created within the Moroccan Green Plan. I think this, from my point of view as an agronomist, the people in charge should have taken into consideration the knowledge, the know-how that was accumulated by local population everywhere in the country, and to build on that to start those mega projects. So as you said, for me as an agronomist, it should have been better if they created a system that mimics the old system based on agroforestry, where we can combine olive tree production with vegetables or with cereals or grain legumes, because the population needs all those. We need olive oil for local consumption, for export, but we need also to feed our population by growing vegetables, by growing cereals and grain legumes. So for the long run, I don't think, imagine like one second, if there is a disease that destroys 1,000-hectare olive grove, that will be a disaster. But if it was an agroforestry system with the association of several tree species, the association of tree species with legumes and cereals, and that will be a system that has enough diversity to protect it against any impact of a single disease or an insect. Same thing apply also about water resources. Creating those mega projects, it will use a lot of water, and if the people are using a large way of planting olive trees, they are not stupid, because they know that they can rely on rainfall in case they are short of underground water. But if we have an intensified olive tree plantation, you need that water anyway, because the needs of that plantation are huge. And what happens if you don't have enough water? There is a case in Rashidia region, when a whole maybe about 1,000 hectares of olives are destroyed because of lack of irrigated water. People cannot use their olives. They cannot harvest anything from them because they lack water to irrigate them. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
This is a good remark and good question. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tobias and Professor Ben Nasser. I have questions on the chat, but somehow not so clear. Can we consider bioagriculture like ecological agriculture? If you like, Saida, you can speak out, or you can also speak in French if it's also Sarah and Nas. And then I can take a question from Ilham Abidi.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Sibel Nasser Alawi, my supervisor. Thank you for your rich and fruitful presentation. I would like to ask you about, we know, of course, we know the benefits of agroforestry system concerning the water conservation and carbon sequestration. But I want to know if are there some conditions we should practice regarding the choice of species should be combined. It is my first question, and the second question, what is about the age and density of trees?
Thank you, Ms. Abidi, for this good question and for your remarks. With regards to combination of species, there are two ways to deal with the situation. Either to see what has been practiced through history, what was been working through surveys, or to do it through experiments, as you are doing yourself in your PhD thesis. You are working with both olive combination with quinoa and also pomegranate combination with quinoa. So either we see what has been working through history, like when I talked about the efficiency of the agroforestry system, comparing the mixture of olive trees with cereals to olive trees with legumes. The combination with legumes is more efficient, as legumes have short growing seasons. They allow fixation of atmospheric nitrogen. So as I said, we should build on the existing, what is working, but we should do experiment to look for the best combination, not only for better use of water, better use of nitrogen or fertilizers in general, but also to combine species that allow a protection of the orchard itself, of the trees themselves. We should create an atmosphere. We should create living conditions that allow to have insects that are favorable for our systems, to discourage those that are unfavorable to our crops. With regard to the age and densities, as again, we should answer this question through the measurements of the old existing systems of agroforestry in the oasis, but also elsewhere, and to do it through experimentations. As for I talked about the mega project with high densities of olive trees or almonds or date palms. Under these conditions, it will be difficult to produce another crop, but it's not impossible. So we can probably think about seeding some medicinal plants that are resistant to water stress. Can you make a better use or produce more crop per drop? So we should study the old systems and experiment with the new ones to answer your question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Professor Ben Nasser.
Welcome.
Anyone who would like to speak out his question? Can we consider bioagriculture as ecological agriculture?
I think the question, can we consider organic agriculture as ecological agriculture?
Yeah, this is how it is written.
Yeah, yeah, sure. The difference between agroecology and organic agriculture is just the process of certification, but both systems use the same principles. In agroecology, we try to use anything that is grown in our farm, in our region, not depending on chemical fertilizers and pesticides in general. And in organic agriculture, it's the same thing, and even it's forbidden. And you have to follow some rules. Without following those rules, you cannot market your product as organic product. So they share many similarities. The only difference is in organic farming, you have to go by rules, by a law, through certification process. In agroecology, it could be the same thing, but it's less organized or less ruled by a form of written laws, written conditions that you have to follow. But at the end, they share the same principles: better use of, or the mimicry, the production of crops and trees by mimicking the nature, like in the forest conditions. No external inputs. We try to rely on what we grow and what we produce on our own farm in our own region, without depending on chemical fertilizers, chemical pesticides, and also GMOs, genetically modified organisms, which are forbidden for organic farming. And I think people who believe in agroecology won't use them anyway. Did I answer your question?
I think this answers your question, and there's why we have different nomination from NAS. Still unclear for me. If you like to speak,
ask the question in French if you like.
Yeah, I just.
Yeah, as you said, Abed.
Yeah, we still have. We can take one or two questions before we close. We were late because of the technical issues.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. People who are not able to give questions, you can always ask me later.
Yes, I can.
I will be glad to answer your questions anytime.
Yeah.
Hello, I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for your sharing. About the experience in MENA region. I'm from China, and you share the terrace farming region in Yemen, and yes, the terrace farming, it also happened in China, not only in the north region, north arid region, and also happened in tropical region in the south of China. Yes, but now the question is, the income is very low, and I don't know yet. Just now you tell us some months go back to their hometown, but what makes them go back in Yemen? The income will be increased or not? Because indigenous farming, agroforestry, and terrace farming, yes, it's very better, but it's not makes them richer, and because they are poor. Yes, so they want to get off income of farming or become citizens, and they want to go outside, not to stay at home to farming. So can you share some experience in Yemen? Why? What makes them go back in Yemen? And another question is that, yes, can you share some experience in Yemen that in China? Like I want to give some example in China. In China, in 1949 to 1980, the collaborative farming is very famous, and it's also improve livelihood of farmers. But now it exists a little because of something happened, and I don't know the collective farming is exist in Yemen or not. Like I want to know, like collective farming and smallholder farming and agricultural business, maybe it's different. Maybe agro business, it will destroy our environment, but like collective farming and smallholder farming is better. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, when I was looking for material and for articles, I was surprised to find some good articles published by Chinese scientists. This is how I knew that the terrace system is also developed. I knew it from the beginning, but I didn't know that there was a research on it. There is terrace system also in Vietnam, and when they grow rice and many other places. With regards to the what makes Yemeni men going back to their countries. In China, you have the same phenomena, but it's for different reasons. The economy of China is growing very fast, and some businessmen, some scientists, some good technicians are going back to their home country, China. In Yemen, it's for political reasons. Because of the conflict, the first conflict in Iraq in 1991, because of the conflict of 2003, Yemeni workers were pushed away from many Gulf countries, so they were forced to anyway to come back home, not because they have more opportunities home, but they have no choice but to go home. So when they were outside, they were earning some money, they were sending back home. That's why they were digging wells, making irrigation, and because they were absent, women cannot take care of terraces that are outside the village because it's too much work for them. But now that men are going back, and because there are no opportunities of job creation in the cities, no possibilities to work outside Yemen, very few opportunities now, and they have no other choice. And the government of Yemen and the donors should put more emphasis on those areas where terraces are existing. What they need is just to be to stay functional, not to be destroyed furthermore. And by doing this, not only do we allow those people who are coming back to work on their own villages or own fields to create wealth and to feed their children, their kids, their families, but this will protect even the land that is in the wadis, because if the terrace system are destroyed, there will be also destruction of wadis that are where we use the water from flood or from digging wells to produce vegetables for the main cities. The second thing is there was a war in Yemen since 2014. It's still going on. That explains that there is some famine. I visited Yemen in 2002 and 2009. There was no famine in that country. People were living decently with the limited resources. Terraces were functioning with beginning of some destruction, but the war exacerbated the phenomena of famine, because many opportunities that the Yemeni people had to gain their life in the cities and their vicinities vanished. So that explains why there was that increasing undernutrition or even famine in some places. With regard to the agribusiness, if I understood your question, in China, if you take China as an example, or Vietnam, or some other Asian countries, the state put a lot of emphasis on the creation of jobs through agribusiness, not only, but through the development of industrial project in the cities, in the big cities, through research, creation of wealth, through also commerce, exchange with the rest of the world. This is not the case for a small country like Yemen, and the last war makes things even worse.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think, I want to give some response. Yes, in China, yes, some people can get lots of job in cities, but it's not good. The government also know. I'll give the example, like during the corona, some farmers lost their job. They must, and also, like some landlord, some people in the cities also lost their job. They must to go back their hometown, and this is good for agriculture. This is good for the for our improving the government. This is good, and this is opportunity to Yemen, to some West region. Yes, it's good,
Okay.
and yeah, I think it's good for improving.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
thank
Very
you.
important.
Thank you, Fengzan and Dr. Nasser. I think we're above time, like 7 minutes. And do you like to take another question, or we can close and they can send the question by email?
As you like.
We can take the one on the chat. Pourquoi nous avons différentes nominations pour le même principe et ces problèmes de carrière de charge?
Pourquoi nous avons différentes nominations pour le même principe et ce problème de cahier de charge? Oui, c'est ça. J'ai déjà répondu à cette question. Il n'y a pas de cahier de charge pour l'agriculture écologique. Par contre, pour l'agriculture biologique, il y a un cahier de charge.
We can take a quick question from Sani.
From
Mehdi.
Sana Mehdi, oui, go ahead. Go ahead, Sana.
Please keep it short. Yeah.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Bonjour.
Cher professeur Sialaoui,
Bonjour.
c'est toujours un plaisir de vous suivre, de vous écouter.
Merci
Voilà.
pour votre présence.
Je vous en prie. Alors voilà, donc c'est vrai, l'agroforesterie, c'est une chose très très importante. Heureusement ou malheureusement, ça fait 30 ans que nous avons quitté, que j'ai quitté l'IAV. Et on n'a pas étudié ça. C'est vrai, on a étudié tout ce qui est raisonnement, tout ce qui est... Mais je pense au niveau formation, actuellement, c'est très important de penser à donner des modules pour les ingénieurs ou même techniciens, des concepts, le cadre réglementaire et un peu de benchmark à l'échelle benchmark international. Parce que c'est l'avenir, je trouve. L'agroécologie ou l'agriculture biologique a des intérêts multiples, que ce soit pour la sauvegarde de l'environnement, la santé humaine, la santé animale, la fertilité des sols. Mais une chose très, très importante, actuellement, je suis en train de faire une étude sur l'agroécologie et l'agriculture biologique. Et selon des enquêtes des focus group, s'il y a un plus de 40% pour le recrutement de main-d'œuvre. Et donc ça, c'est une chose très, très importante, la création d'emplois. Et pourquoi pas l'entrepreneuriat des jeunes? Est-ce qu'on peut penser à ce que l'agroécologie ou l'agroforesterie soit une idée, ou bien pour ceux qui ont, par exemple, 1 hectare ou 2 hectares, c'est pour, dans le cadre, par exemple, pilier 2, les petits agriculteurs, leurs fils, peuvent créer une exploitation d'agroforesterie ou d'agriculture biologique et après former des coopératives pour créer un grand pool de valorisation pour l'export ou à l'échelle nationale. Donc ça, c'est un point très, très important. Et je trouve que ça peut, c'est une question de développement durable, c'est pour la création d'emplois, donc un impact socio-économique. 3, c'est une chose très importante comme ressource et de substitution à un système qui était vraiment, je ne dis pas qui est mal conçu, mais qui est, ça y est, maintenant, on ne peut plus suivre cette agriculture conventionnelle à long terme. Voilà. Donc, merci beaucoup. Et est-ce qu'il y a, la question, c'est que est-ce qu'il y a des études qui montrent que le pourcentage d'augmentation de la main-d'œuvre ou des travailleurs au niveau d'une exploitation agroécologique ou d'agroforesterie par rapport à l'agriculture conventionnelle. Et merci infiniment. Deuxième question, c'est que est-ce que vous pensez à une formation? Je sais qu'il y a une formation pour un master au niveau de l'IAV, mais quand est-ce que vous allez commencer cette formation et quel est le nombre d'ingénieurs ou de lauréats qui seront bénéficiaires de cette formation? Mais merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup, cher prof.
Thank you, Sana. Do you mind if I can answer in English?
Oui, oui, bien sûr. Oui,
okay.
Bien sûr.
Okay, thank you.
Désolé, j'ai posé la question en français. Si vous pouvez faire un petit résumé en anglais. Hein.
Sure. Yeah, Ms. Sana talked about some very important issues regarding the possibilities of job creation in the system, adopting the organic farming system or agroecology system. And she asked if there is some studies that can document if we can create more jobs with agroecology compared to conventional agriculture. I saw some kind of studies, but I have to look in my hard disk. I think I saw something like that, not in Morocco, but elsewhere. For sure, we will create more jobs with agroecology and organic farming compared to conventional, and with agroforestry also, because we are dealing with high degree of intensification of a given piece of land. We are growing tree, olive tree, for example. We are growing also cereal or legume or grain legume. With regard to the training, as Sana said, in all times, we're training engineers and technicians on conventional agriculture, management of crops and systems by using chemical fertilizers, tillage, chemical control of weeds, of diseases, of fungi. But we are focusing now more and more on agroecology, and within the framework of green, what we call it, green generation. I myself trained some professors, teachers who are themselves trainers of technicians depending on the Ministry of Agriculture, la formation des techniciens, technician formation. So we have with them several sessions to give them enough material so themselves they can pass it to technicians so they can work with farmers on making change from conventional to organic farming system within their farms. With regards to the masters of organic farming at the AV, we have everything was ready to start. We contacted some specialists inside Morocco and outside Morocco, actually with even University of Kassel in Germany, with some people in organic department there. But because of COVID, we put that aside, hoping that in the sanitary situation will improve and we can implement this professional masters, which will be open to different specialities, people in vegetable production, in field crops, in animal husbandry, agroeconomics, which they have already some background in agricultural formation. So with regard to the number, it's hard to say, but if it's on distance, we can handle any number we like. But if it's presential, which will be on classrooms, because of the formation will have many technical many technical aspects. They will work. They have to work on some specific project at the level of the farm, at the level of a factory, in a lab. We will have therefore a limited number, depending on the possibilities to have those people. Each one will be followed by a specialist in his own area. So maybe it won't be a problem, because we will select some highly motivated people, and you are one of them. You will not have a problem following this training for the Master in Organic Agriculture.